Hello and welcome to Transforming Worlds.
The Latin root of the word frugal comes from frug, which means fruit. So, frugality is not about minimizing or reducing your resources or tightening your belt. It's about fructifying the resources you have.
In this episode, we speak to Navi Radjou, who's a French-American innovation and leadership scholar. He has co-led the Center for India and Global Business at Cambridge University's Judge Business School in the UK and served as a vice president at Forrester Research, a technology and research consulting firm in Boston, USA. Navi is ranked by Thinkers50 as one of the most influential management thinkers in our time and has won the Thinkers50 Innovation Award, as well as speaking on TED conferences globally on frugal innovation, delivering more than 2 million views. Navi is the co-author of global bestseller Jugaad Innovation and From Smart to Wise, Acting and Leading with Wisdom. His most recent book is called The Frugal Economy, a guide to building a better world with less, where he shows how businesses and nations can maximize human potential and social well-being within planetary boundaries. Join us in an amazing conversation where we discuss things like conscious business and humanizing the economy, the importance of local value networks, and he discusses examples of how we can bring frugality so that it can bear the fruits of our efforts for creating a better world for us all. And so we start season 3 of Transforming Worlds. Tune in. Welcome, Navi, to Transforming Worlds. I'm very happy to speak to you today. How are you?
I'm very well, Carla. Thanks for hosting me.
Oh, I'm delighted. I've been following your work, back from way back in the days when I was working on innovation, and I'm excited to hear about your new book coming up, and how your ideas keep evolving, keep improving through time. So tell us, where are you right now with regards to your work, and what is transforming for you?
Right now, I'm in Bangalore, India, and I was born and raised in India. So I decided to leave the US in November 2024. And you know what happened at the time in the US. So I decided that maybe I need a break from the US and I decided to come back to India. And I'm spending my time here doing some research in the field. India, as you know, is changing rapidly. There's a lot of transformation happening in India. And there's a lot of transformation happening around the world. And I felt that India may be a good base from which I can, analyze, understand, and navigate this brave new world that we are entering.
And having been there and then gone back, you returned transformed back to your to Bangalore and to your environment. How do you look at yourself now? Is it different than from when you left?
Absolutely. I mean, I left India 35 years ago, and the India today is very different. Just to give you an idea, in 2007, India became a $1 trillion economy. And today, there is one state called Tamil Nadu alone as the ambition to become a $1 trillion economy by 2030. So you can see how fast the country is growing. Because when I left India, it was still a closed economy, and the economy opened up in 1991. And since then, it has been very much, a story of growth. First, a bit slow growth compared to China. And now I feel that India is at, the kind of what we call the hyper-growth stage. It's just about to take off the way China did about 12, 15 years ago. So there's a lot of excitement, and the good thing is that it helps India bring enough economic wealth and stability to 1.4 billion people. But at the same time, there are also more challenges today than I experienced as a kid. Because we have to deal with the huge needs of 1.4 billion people. So the question is, how are we going to satisfy sustainably, the needs of 1.5 billion people, without kind of depleting all the natural resources we have and things like that. So there are some concerns, but overall, the optimism that you find right now in the air in India is in striking contrast with the doom and gloom that we experience in Europe or even the US right now.
Yeah, I think also there's this beauty of the mentality in India that doom and gloom is just something that is passing, as Shiva shows himself and then moves on to give place to Brahma and Vishnu. So this is what we all hope for India, and I think you've touched upon something that is so relevant for everyone in the world as the world is transforming as well, which is this idea of sustainability, and beyond sustainability, regeneration, right? So how do we do better with less, as you've said? And this is a skill that developing countries like my own country, Argentina, and like India have as a skill that we've honed to a wonderful degree, and that is now being presented with this transformed world that you're showing us. So how might we go about that, and what is frugality in that context?
Yeah, I mean, frugality has different kind of meanings in different cultures. In India, of course, frugality is a reality because we have a lot of resource constraints. If you look at per capita of each of an Indian, it's still a fraction of a European or an American. Or you look at how much electricity we consume per capita in India, it's about 1/5 of a French citizen, and maybe 10, 12 times less than what Americans consume as
Yes.
electricity. So in many regards, India is and will be a frugal nation. That means that a nation where we earn a little bit little, and we spend little, and we are very prudent in the way we use all resources, financial resources or material resources. But in the West, frugality, particularly as we speak in Europe, it's becoming very popular, the term frugal, for two reasons. One is the climate change, which is causing a lot of European countries to do more with less. That is, keep growing while reducing emissions,
Yes.
and we call it decoupling. So this is, a way of growing frugally. That means, not necessarily less growth, but growth which is sustainable from an environmental standpoint. But then the second reason frugality is becoming popular and urgent in Europe. I'm a French citizen, and by 2029, the French government has to save 110 billion euros in public savings, in public spending,
Yes.
in order to be, sustainable as a state. So there is growing pressure with the aging population and the growing need for social services in Europe for the governments to do more with less. So the idea of frugal governance, or frugal healthcare, for example, frugal education, are becoming popular in Europe, where governments have to deliver basic public services like healthcare education using basically fewer fiscal resources. So that's the difference you see between India and Europe. Is that in India, just as you said a few minutes ago, is that frugality for us is part of our DNA. There's nothing to crow about or to feel proud about. It's part of our nature. In Europe, it's different. We are unlearning profligacy and learning frugality.
Yes.
And then America, I won't even go there because I think that it's going to take at least a couple of years, or unless under Trump, radically, it's possible that many cities or communities will be forced to embrace frugality because of the massive cuts, in public services.
Yeah, I think that this contrast is really interesting, because I think we can look at frugality from, as you say, something that is integrated into the mindset about being careful, being thoughtful, being attentive to how we utilize things moving forward. And then there is this view of frugality as a boundary thing. Like, perhaps because of the European mindset that is formed also because of scarcity and war, right? That frugality is something that limits you, whereas I think that there is a view of frugality that is, it's actually a creative endeavor. It's something about almost playing with possibility and seeing how you can be frugal as an end in itself, because it's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. So there's a big contrast in what you're saying, and one that I think we're really at a point of economic and social transition where we're going to have to make choices as people. How do we go about frugality? Is it seeing it as a limitation or seeing it as a possibility? And I think I really like how you talk about, and I'd like you to elaborate on that, the difference between sustainability and regeneration.
Yes, building on your point, that would be a nice way to transition to sustainability, and the difference between sustainability and regeneration is that what you just said is important for the audience to understand that if you go back in history, interestingly, the founding father of America, for example, Benjamin Franklin, famously, said that, with frugality in industry, everything can be achieved. Without them, nothing can be achieved. So the founding fathers of America, for example, which is the least frugal country today, actually considered frugality as a core value of the American culture. It's just that they lost touch with it. The same way, you should understand that, and I learned myself recently, the Latin root of the word frugal comes from frug, which means fruit. So frugality is not about minimizing or reducing your resources or tightening your belt. It's about fructifying the resources you have. And this is where I would like to share a French verb, which is less used in English, which is to valorize, to valorize. To valorize means redeeming something and finding clever ways to extract value from something that has traditionally been underappreciated. Right? And these could be cultural resources, could be natural resources, it could be intellectual resources. And so frugality is not about minimizing resources as much about valorizing the resources you may already have, within your community or within your organization, but have been depreciated over time. And now you need to find clever ways to, extract more value from them as a way to compensate for the scarcity of resources like water, energy, land, that are going to get scarce, whether we want it or not. So I wanted to flag that because, frugality traditionally, historically, has always had a very positive, liberating, connotation. It's just that, as you rightly pointed out, maybe after World War II in the West, we got a bit too, accustomed to a kind of what I call a false abundance, a sense of false abundance, which often is, fueled by credit cards and debt, basically.
Yes, of course. Yeah. Yes. So going to the, because I don't necessarily like the word sustainability very much. The concept behind it I do like, but sustainability suggests that there is something to sustain, to keep that way. Whereas you make a nice contrast between this idea and the idea of regeneration, which is valorization, as you talk. What is here that can be generating what is next? The idea of looking at everything from the potential it has, as opposed to waste. So as a designer, I look also to an American, actually in this case, a late American architect called Buckminster Fuller, who was absolutely convinced, and his life philosophy was that there's enough for everyone and there's a place for everyone in this planet. Even if we go way beyond the 8 billion that we currently are, there is still place. We're meant to be here. And this was his search in architecture. But he famously said, waste is something valuable, the value of which we fail to recognize. It's not that it doesn't have value, it's just that we're not seeing it. So in regeneration, there is this revalorization aspect that takes us beyond, like, okay, we've got to stretch this to make it go as long as it can. No, it's like this can bear new fruit. So I really wanted to make space for this concept, because it's also how we feel about it, right? So when you are frugal from the point of view of valorization, you actually feel proud and accomplished by the result of valorizing. Um, so what led you there? What did you see that was wrong in the world or right in frugality that led you to want to communicate this message to people?
Yeah, so I spent 13 years in Silicon Valley where I discovered that the way that Americans innovate is basically by throwing a lot of money into big projects. And you can see that, for example, recently, the way that OpenAI was developed, right, using billions of dollars. And then you see that, the Chinese came up with the DeepSeek, by spending, a fraction of what Americans spend and the Silicon Valley, companies spend. So that's something I experienced firsthand because I lived in Silicon Valley for 13 years. And I found that the type of innovation that we're developing in Silicon Valley was not frugal for two reasons. One is because it required a lot of investments. And I knew that many countries like India could not afford to spend, billions of dollars in research and development to create innovative solutions. And secondly, the kind of technologies developed in Silicon Valley are not frugal in the sense they are not affordable to the mainstream population, right? Even an iPhone, let's say, $1,000, only 10% of the world population can afford it. So I got a bit, if you like, disillusioned with the Silicon Valley ethos of innovation, which is summarized by the bigger is better, and, more with more. And then I wanted to kind of reconnect with my Indian roots and figure out, is there an Indian way of innovating, which I experienced growing up in India in the 70s, 80s, but I wanted to formalize it. And about 13 years ago, based on 5 years of research, I co-published my first book, which introduced, the Indian way of innovating that we call Jugaad, which is a Hindi word for creative improvisation. And that was the trigger. The trigger point was, my childhood in India, and then coming to US, living for 13 years in America, experiencing the extreme of overconsumption, but also the overproduction of innovation and the kind of innovation that Sam Pitroda, a well-known Indian entrepreneur and policymaker, used to say that the world's best brains are busy trying to solve the problems of the rich people who really don't have problems. And that's what I saw in Silicon Valley. So I wanted to come back to India to discover a frugal way to innovate that actually brings value to society and 99% of the population, and not just 5% of the elite population.
That's so admirable. That's really fantastic. Yes, I remember your work with Yugad, and also the critique that it raised, because it's a critique we also get as designers. As designers, we like to prototype, and people say, no, 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 just get on with it and do the final thing. But there is so much learning in this creative improvisation, right? So especially now when we don't have answers, so we have to try different things and work with what we have, because that actually leads to sort of brilliant openings that then can be optimized, which is where it's worth putting the money. It's worth putting the money once you understand what needs to be done. Before that, there is again this concept of waste, right? Which you've seen there so much.
I think, Carla, what you say is important. I think people have to hear that. It's because I had the same criticism because I live in India. Jugaad is sometimes seen as cutting corners. That's the mindset, what in Brazil we call it jeitinho. But Brazil has jeitinho, which is the kind of cutting corners, but they also have gambiarra, which is a Brazilian Portuguese expression, which means make do with what you have. And you can come up with very creative solutions that are functional and yet, reuse existing resources. And what you said is very profound, because the need for experimentation is going to grow because we are changing all paradigms, right? In every domain, the paradigms are shifting. So it's kind of ridiculous to say don't experiment and don't practice Jugaad, because unless you practice Jugaad, you don't know, you're going from state A to state B, so you don't know where you're going to be landing anyway. So I think that people who are criticizing Jugaad, I think it's important that I emphasize is that these are people who don't understand that the paradigm, the box within which they're operating is crumbling.
Yes, yes, well
Right?
said.
They're convinced that somehow we are going to go back to the old paradigm, right? And I want really them to hear this is that the old is dead, right? Actually, transformation means that you acknowledge that the old is dead. And David Graeber, the anthropologist who coined the term bullshit jobs, famously says the tragedy today is that the old world is dead, the new world is already born, but we are conscious of neither of that. Right. So that's where Jugaad is all about, building this new world as you enter that new world, right? But at the same time, when you do that, you actually, have to acknowledge that the old world is dead and buried once for all.
Yeah, but that is hard to do for most people because
And that's why we see right now, exactly. I mean, what you see in geopolitics and the world globally right now
right.
is that we are trying to maintain what I call a zombie reality, a reality that is dead, that we are artificially trying to, keep it alive. But what I focus my energy is actually in doing research on the new world, which has already emerged, and try to share with the world what I see happening in this new world.
Yes. So you've shared 100 examples in your latest book. Do you have favorites or don't you?
Yeah, I mean, there are several favorite examples. One of them is a French startup that is building a car called Avatar. And this is a car that consumes, it's an electric car that consumes 3 times less energy than typical EVs. So it's very energy efficient. But the real innovation in the car is the way it's built. Unlike Tesla's Gigafactory, a huge factory that churns out thousands of cars every day. Avatar, this French startup, will be building a network of micro factories in different regions across Europe, where local entrepreneurs can assemble these cars using local talent and local resources. So this is what I call distributed manufacturing, which is going to be a radically new paradigm that could help Europe reindustrialize wisely and repeat the kind of mistake we made, during Industrial Revolution by trying to build increasingly bigger factories, that, as are polluting, energy inefficient, and also they only mass produce standardized goods. But these micro factories can produce different goods and can be personalized and adapted to local needs and local resources.
Right. And again, there's this whole concept of regeneration about sort of really creating local value networks on the ground that produce value and regenerate value locally, instead of, speaking of wasted energy, transporting goods all over the world, creating all manner of climate havoc by doing that, and particularly dehumanizing the local economies, which I know that it's something that you are really, quite clear about. We have to move to a more conscious society, a more humanized society, where we start seeing that this innovation and this capacity to create value is within us and not outside of us. So this is a beautiful...
Actually, Carola, you're saying something important here. I think people have to hear this as well, is that regeneration this year is going to become a hot topic. For example, Thinkers50, which is a community of top management thinkers, want to introduce regeneration as the main theme this year at the event. That means that you'll be hearing a lot more about regenerative leadership, regenerative economy, regenerative businesses. But the problem I have with the current way of interpreting and applying regeneration in the business world is that it's very limited to natural ecosystems. It's about regenerating biodiversity. It's about giving back more to the planet than we take. That's all fine. or becoming carbon negative, for example, right? But I love the planet, okay? But I always tell provocatively that, I am first and foremost a humanist, before being an ecologist. And as you rightly pointed out, there are many communities around the world that are struggling. And one of them that I talk about in my new book is the Appalachia region, in America, which is many of those territories are former mining towns that totally got decimated, because of the deindustrialization, and now they are trying to regenerate the local communities by focusing on the health of the people, on creating new jobs in green industries, and then regenerating at the same time the local biodiversity. Okay, so this is what I call triple regeneration, because the Appalachia is not narrowly focusing on only regenerating the natural landscape. They're also thinking about how do we revitalize human beings, the people. As you know, there's a big opioid crisis in Appalachia. So there's a need to restore and grow people and the places as much as the planet. That's what I mean by triple regeneration, which I hope will become a systemic approach to practicing regeneration. Otherwise, my concern is that it may go the same path as circular economy, which is a noble concept, but today practiced in a very narrow way by focusing on recycling without realizing that circular economy is also about reducing consumption and production and reusing resources. Somehow those first two R's, went away, disappeared, and now the capitalist system hijacked the circular economy and is practicing in a very narrow way by focusing only on recycling.
Yeah, but that's why we need more people like you, because we are in a time of liminality. We are in a time of transition. So liminality means that it's all blurring until just before it actually becomes clear, right? And in that blurring, we get confused. And then what happens is we take concepts of the old crumbled world and try to connect them, because of course that gives us familiarity, that gives us a sense that there is still something we understand, and that does corrupt the ideas quite a bit. It is scientifically proven that the human in the loop, when it comes to ecology, is a necessary component. So when ecosystems crumble, very often one of the reasons is there is no human taking care of the stewardship that is required of us as humanity, so that nature can thrive, so that ecology can thrive with us in it. But we come from an old model, a model that is based on suffering, on punishment, on discipline, on one right way of doing things. And if we apply that, then we become very critical of ourselves instead of, Dugard says it, right? Creatively improvising with our curiosity, our talent, our sense of wonder, our belief in better. And we forget that we do matter, and we matter quite a lot. So you were talking about the avatar car. You talked to us about the Appalachian region. Do you have another example that is perhaps a bit closer to how things were? So more transitional?
Yeah, I mean, the one that I've been talking about is one of the pillars of this frugal economy is how do we turbocharge cooperation and collaboration among companies, because today the capitalist system encourages competition. So I'm actually using what I call business to business sharing, which is a new paradigm similar to the same way you have today Uber and Airbnb, which enables us to share, cars and apartments. The idea is, today there are new platforms that enable companies to share their, physical resources and human resources. And here, the example I would like to cite, because that shows the social impact that could have. During COVID, the largest producer of facial mask in France, called Call Me Open, used a sharing platform set up by the local government to identify another manufacturer located nearby. And they used the industrial expertise of that other company to rapidly reconfigure the factory processes so they could double the production of masks in a single weekend. So in other words, the message here is that if I don't have critical skills in-house, I can look around and say, oh, that company, has some skills that I can borrow, right, from. And this is called talent sharing or even employee sharing. And it's interestingly well developed in European countries like France. And you should be proud to know that Netherlands has had the oldest European B2B sharing platform, which is called Flow2, FLOOW2, which enables hospitals in Netherlands to share their underused equipment and services with each other, which brings better services to patients. So that is a good example of how do we go from competing as companies to co-creating value, and that collaborative ethos is perfectly captured by the Indian saying that 1 + 1 = 11.
Yeah, I wonder what that does to transparency, right? Because we're coming from the old model, which maximizes profit for the profit to be earned by private individuals. When we move this to a cooperative model and we move this to a model of collaboration and sharing, which is much more based on a longer term view. Like I share with you today, you share with me tomorrow. And because of the sharing, in the end, we're all much better off. But in the short term, not necessarily, because if you do part of my work, then I didn't earn the full amount, right? How do we reconcile this?
Yeah, remember that B2B sharing, just like in the consumer to consumer sharing, right? If you are renting your apartment on Airbnb, it's because you're not using it,
Of
right?
course.
You're not gonna bring in a guest if you're already inside, right? So that would be, competition, right? So the specific examples where you share your resources as company is when you don't need them. Or here's another great example, right? There is something called industrial symbiosis, which means that a company can say, I have some waste and I can sell the waste to another company, and that waste becomes the raw material for another company, right? So there
Yes.
are some steel companies that will take the co-product of the steel fabrication, and then they will give that to another company that makes concrete, right? That can be used, as input. So this is an example where there is no intellectual property in the resource I share, and actually it generates more income for me, by sharing my underused, resources. So that is the first level you can start. And then the second level is very interesting, is where you say, actually, I'm going to cooperate with other companies to co-create a bigger pie. And as you rightly said, today companies, when they compete, that's because there's a belief that the size of the pie is fixed. So they're all gunning for, a piece of the pie, right? And they're clinging to it. But if you think differently and you say, no, actually, I'm going to share my resources so that together we can create a new market. Like, for example, the distributed manufacturing market, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or the regeneration market. And that's what I'm promoting these days, is that I'm saying that, wow, these new markets that are emerging that I talk about in my new book, each of them is trillions of dollars worth, right? So while the old world is crumbling, you may be worried like, oh my God, I'm going to lose some market share and revenues. People don't realize that there are these exciting, huge markets emerging, and you can shape these new markets by cooperating with other companies, in which case you're baking, so to speak, right, a bigger pie, and everyone gets a bigger piece.
Which means that we need to redesign the KPIs, because if we are measuring the future with the KPIs of the past, then it's not going to be up to benchmark.
Absolutely.
What KPIs do we need when we think about cooperation, collaboration, distributed models, local value networks? What do we need to measure? What do we need to look for?
And the answer is what you just said a few minutes ago, is that we are in a phase of experimentation. So when you're facing experimentation, and this is something interesting, it repeats itself in history, because the same thing happened 15 years ago when multinationals came to India. They were using the KPIs applied in mature markets like America to emerging markets. So they were saying like, oh, we're going to invest 10 million in India, and then in 2 years, we need to see the return, right? But that doesn't work because you're actually building a new market, right? So the way I use as an analogy is that, you need to build the highway first before you can sell cars, right? If you come to a country, there are no highways, right? And you're a car company, first you have to invest money in building the highways. It may seem like it's a lost cause, but actually in the long run, it's beneficial to you. So the KPI, as if I continue the analogy, the KPI shouldn't be how many cars you sell every year, but how quickly you're building the highway so that in 3 years, you can start selling the cars. So coming back directly to your question, that means that some of the KPIs have to be for executives are not hard KPIs, quantifiable,
Yes.
but could also be what I call KPIs that measure learning. That means what are the new things you're learning, right? And how you are applying what you're learning to build new business units, to shape new markets. So I would say that 50% of the KPI should be, very quantifiable, like, how much growth you're generating, every quarter. I think that should still be there, but you need a balanced scorecard where some of the quantifiable KPIs are balanced with KPIs that are more qualitative, and try to measure if the executives are still clinging to the old paradigm or are unlearning that and are relearning, new ways of doing business. Like, for example, learning to cooperate, with other companies, learning to localize the value chains, right? So those new KPIs have to be more qualitative in nature. And some companies I know in France and mostly European countries do incorporate these kind of, I call them soft KPIs, to make sure that, they are they're learning the new rules of the new game, and not just competing in the, in the old game.
Yeah, I think that's also there is certainly a European mindset to this, because of the same reason we talked about, sort of the post-war Europe. Europe is where it is today for two reasons. One, may it last forever, peace. And the second is the realization that collectively we had to rebuild Europe. No one could do it on their own. And I think that these values are still there, and they are potentially easier to reemerge, because these are values that belong to the organizational, the business, the institutional world, as opposed to, for example, in developing countries, we tend to be very social as a we culture, helping one another as individuals, in families, as friends. But here there is also this ability to collaborate, which was needed to rebuild Europe, and which has led to success. So people can kind of lean on that, but it is hard. It's hard to do because, if you it feels still like you're giving something away before you are receiving something back, and so it is an act of mindset, of belief, before it is actually delivering something tangible. And that's
and you're right, Caroline. That's why I think we should start teaching MBA students in business schools things like the economics of mutuality, right?
Right.
So what you
Yes.
described, so economics of mutuality is being taught in Said Business School at Oxford. The candy company Mars has set up a chair in Said Business School at Oxford.
Oh, wow.
And in the core curriculum, MBA students learn to replace the economics of competitiveness and predation with the economics of mutuality, with the idea that indeed, the more you give, the more you receive. And so whether it's reciprocity, mutuality, however you want to call it, it's something that may be difficult for established executives, to learn. But I'm hopeful that if you start teaching the young MBAs, the future managers, these new values, I'm kind of hopeful that in the next 5-10 years anyway, because these young people, they're already in social media sharing and collaborating, right? So for
Yes.
them, it's going to be like, just like you have the concept of bring your own devices to work. It's like bringing your own, kind of personal values, to work. So the young people, the young managers will be, in the same way we talk about digital natives. I think they are cooperative natives, right? They kind of
Oh,
are
I love
wired
that
that way.
term.
And so that's why I wrote this book in a way, dedicating it to the millennials and the Gen Z, because I think for my generation, which is Gen X and even the baby boomers, the kind of thing we are talking about now, regeneration, cooperation, or decentralization, they are a bit, they're a bit difficult for them to swallow these concepts.
For sure. And I think that touching on the economics of mutuality is brilliant because there is all of this kind of systems thinking aspects that, back in the day, like as a fellow Gen Xer, back in the day, the work of the likes of Peter Senge tried to bring this into business, but I think he was too early in some way. There was still like this bullish idea that there was still profit to be made and strategic planning that would save the world. And now we've noticed that that doesn't happen. And what is beautiful about the cooperative natives, I just wrote it down. I think you coined the term there. You should claim it. It's amazing. I love it. These
Okay.
cooperative natives, and that includes my children, they look at stuff and they're like, why did you make it so complicated? Yes, it's complex, but that doesn't need to be complicated. There can be simplicity in complexity. Actually, that might be the way through, right? And we kind of missed that one. I don't know if it was the 80s and sort of the Reagan Thatcher sort of very neoliberal look at the world and, growth and all of these things, or what changed that. But it's time now to look at the whole system, to look at mutuality and to look at cooperation, because it's what's going to save us. For sure.
And yeah, I mean, and the give and take implies trust as well, right? Is that if I give to you, I'm not giving to you as an individual. It's an act of solidarity.
Yes.
Right? So that means that when I'm helping you, I'm not helping you as one person. It's my way of contributing to society as a whole, with the trust that tomorrow, and that's why I come back to Europe, because in Europe, the social net is quite solid, that I know even if I give a bit too much, tomorrow I will be taken care of. Okay. One of the reasons we don't see that in America is that there's no social net. And especially under Trump, it's going to be totally disappearing. And that's very scary because it encourages even more individualism, right? Even more mistrust towards others. And that's why, and as a European, I'm kind of proud to say this, is that when I did my research for my book, I couldn't find a single sharing platform in America among companies.
Oh, wow.
Not a single. All of them mostly are in Europe.
For our listeners, there's a business opportunity for you right there.
Absolutely. And as a matter of fact, I'm naively hoping that, maybe American entrepreneurs, there are some I've already documented. There's a company called Reapply in Chicago that enables companies to reuse their resources collectively. There's another company called Zometry, XOMETRY, which enables small manufacturers to share the manufacturing capacity. So there are some interesting startups in America, but they are approaching the sharing in a very transactional, with the kind of capitalist mindset. And that's why I find refreshing when I come to Europe, because in Europe, the kind of startups that practice B2B sharing, they do that not only for economic gains, but also to create more social impact. That's why I think that the social values in Europe, we don't valorize, coming back to that verb. Okay, we take them for granted. And I really insist in my book that, the superpower of Europe is the combination of this Jugaad mindset, the social heart, and the ecological soul. Okay, it's this triad that makes Europe what differentiates Europe from America or even from Asia.
Yeah, that's beautiful, and it's so important. Yeah, of course, in this podcast, I'm a designer. I subscribe to the definition of design by the late Herbert Simon, who was the dean of the Carnegie Mellon School of Design in the U.S., and who famously said that everyone designs who devises courses of action to transform existing conditions into preferred ones. So, what is to what is preferable, and this necessitates design principles. You can't get there without making the intention of the design explicit. And this is what the world needs right now, for us to be having conversations about why and how we're doing things, and then trying things and aligning them back to that original intention. And the cooperative natives, as you called them, are going to help us achieve that. So let's imagine we were to fast forward into the future, say maybe 20 years, 50 years. What might society look like then, when these things have taken form in our societies?
I would say 20 years from now, when I look back how it was 20 years ago
Yeah.
compared to today. 20 years ago, for example, people in the Western economies never took seriously emerging markets. We used to talk about BRICS countries and things like that,
Mm-hmm.
but it was the BRIC economies, Brazil, Russia, China, and South Africa, were seen primarily as markets for Western products. But today, amazingly, right, many Western companies acknowledge that there's much to learn from the global South in terms of new innovation models, new leadership paradigms, etc. So if you push it forward 20 years from now, my kind of dream is that maybe children studying mathematics in Paris or in Amsterdam or New York will learn, for instance, that the number zero was invented 1500 years ago by two Indians named Aryabhatta and Brahmagupta. So that is kind of my hope, is that the kids in the West will study the philosophers and the scientists, from India, China, and Africa.
Mm. And when we do, and when we learn that and we apply it, what happens then?
I think there will be a shift in consciousness, because one of the issue that I think Europe, particularly because I'm a French citizen, is suffering from, is that we don't have, I'm kind of using a kind of academic term here, being a geek, we don't have what we call epistemological diversity, right?
Mm-hmm.
That means that, we don't have different ways of grasping reality, because we are kind of stuck in one way of looking at, what is reality. And if you want to solve wicked problems that we are facing today, you need to have different perspectives. And that means that you can see the world through different lenses. And when I said that the kids in the Western world in 20 years can appreciate the perspectives of African, Chinese, and Indians, they can solve problems and develop robust solutions
Mm.
to the wicked problems. And we are going to face wicked problems, right, in the next 20 years, as we know. But to solve them, we need a new breed of entrepreneurs and innovators who are, comfortable embracing, multiple perspectives, and having a polycentric worldview rather than a monocentric Western viewpoint.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Our listeners have heard us talk before about the work of a Colombian anthropologist who works in the US called Arturo Escobar, who talks about pluriversality and indeed multiple ways of being, multiple ways of knowing, and really how this is enriching and creating resilience for us and for the ecology that we're a part of. So important and so wonderful. And we're faced with wicked problems, that's for sure. But if we look at them through the lens of frugality, I think we can really get to a new and better place together. Where can people find your work? You have a website with your name. So tell us where people can
Yes.
find you.
You can just visit my website, which is navirajou.com.
Yes.
I'm super active on LinkedIn, so you can connect with me on LinkedIn, and we can chat on LinkedIn as well. And then you can also, Google and find more about the 4 books I published so far. And yeah, and you can email me if you want to continue this conversation.
Okay, we will add all of that to the show notes and some of the references you made as well. So our last question on transforming worlds is called the quest for questions, and it comes from an idea that I had in a book I wrote 12 years ago called prophetically called Change Ahead, and that says the following: when we are facing the unknown, we can't have answers. We always have questions. So, what is your next question?
The big next question I'm kind of grappling with is how do we shift the consciousness of people? Because we keep talking about, changing the mindset, right? You hear a lot about changing the perspective, changing the mindset. But for me, all that is here, right? I mean, it's about, worldview. It's about, intellectually grasping problems. That's all fine. But in India, we think that more than intellect, what defines, a human being is the level of consciousness. And so my the question I'm grappling with is like, how do we, rapidly broaden and shift the consciousness of people? So, for instance, as you rightly said, they have a visceral understanding that they are part of nature. They have a, innate understanding, a kind of a visceral comprehension that they are part of a society. But because all that cannot be intellectually comprehended. And I think my concern right now is that we are focusing so much on intellectually grasping the issues we face, climate change, social inequalities. But in India, we always say that, with practices like yoga, the focus is on raising and elevating your consciousness so that your perspective broadens. And so the inner transformation is, for me, more important and urgent right now than the outer transformation. And I'm trying to figure out what tools that we have at our disposal, maybe from the Indian tradition, that can accelerate the shift in consciousness. Because if you don't accelerate that, and if it's going to let nature take its its due course, I think it's going to be too late for us to deal with the kind of the existential threats that we are facing right now.
It's true. It sounds like a warning, but it's not. Because if we don't participate in the flow of life and in the flow of consciousness, and we resist it, as we know from the Indian traditions, then it shifts us.
Yes. Yes.
And
yes.
so it can't be a warning, because transformation happens and change happens. When you do it by design, it's more, you are bringing your intention to participate in that process of change and therefore transform. And then it can be indeed something very enriching. So I really like what you say. I think that the concept of consciousness will have to be reviewed in the next episode. Yes. Because it's such a huge topic, right. But it's a very
different ways of interpreting consciousness, in the West and East.
Yes.
And as a matter of fact, that's what's happening. There are some new groups formed. Deepak Chopra is one of them leading that, is to have a dialogue between, East and West, North and South, on what is consciousness, right? And secondly, not only define it, but how do we actually elevate consciousness? How do we broaden consciousness? And I believe that actually, just like regeneration, I believe that consciousness is going to be a hot new discipline, and actually a transdisciplinary field that will bring people from different domains. And that's why I've been working on my next book called Conscious Society for 10 years, because I was allowing my own inner transformation to unfold. I didn't want to just sit and write the book. So, and I'm hoping to publish it in 2027, because that marks 20 years of my spiritual rebirth in 2007. So it took me 20 years of maturation and evolution of my own consciousness. So I feel ready to tell the world now about how they can, raise their own consciousness.
Wow, it's fascinating. Why do we have to wait so long?
I do feel that, and it's a bit, sorry to close on a provocative term, I feel like today we are in a world where people are not receptive to kind of very profound messages. I feel like people are, either scared or distracted. So I feel like it's going to happen. It's going to be like this in 2025 and even maybe 2026. So I learned the hard way that, the timing is important. Like Steve Jobs always say, right? You can have a great product, but if you introduce in the wrong time, it's going to be a failure. So I feel like this book is, the world needs it, the idea of conscious society. And I've been working on it for 10 years. But I always felt intuitively that the timing wasn't right. And I feel like we have to wait another year or two when people come to intuitively understand that, you know what, we try different things, we try to change our mindset, we try to change our perspective, but ultimately we need to start changing our consciousness. And at that time, my book will be coming, in a very timely way.
Yes. Yeah, that's the real transformation that we have ahead of us. So wonderful. And for me, something to be very optimistic about, something very good for all of us. Sometimes a bit painful, but certainly leading us to a better place, a more balanced place, a cleaner energy, not only from a fossil fuel perspective, but from a heart perspective. So that's very beautiful. I look forward.
Carol, I just want to, sorry, a bit talkative, but I think what you said is very profound. And I think that that's another important insight the listeners have to really remember. You said balance, right? That for me is the biggest paradigm shift we need to have. When I say shifting consciousness, right, it's not about increasing, even the terms, right? And we talk about elevating consciousness. There's always an hierarchy, right? The 7 stages, the 7 levels of consciousness. But what I'm arguing in my next book is that actually becoming more conscious is not about climbing a mountain, right? Like mount consciousness and go to the top and put a flag and say, yay, right. So that is not what we're talking about. It's more about balancing. It's more about actually, figuring out how do you find that harmony and try to find the delicate balance between, let's say, satisfying material needs of 5 billion people, right, in the global south, who still don't have basic material needs, and then things like spiritual needs, right? So I think that when we talk about a conscious society, it's a conscious society is one that tries to balance the different conflicting needs, right, of the citizens, and I think that's important to remember, because a conscious society is less about developing a maturity model and say, okay, in 5 years, we are going to be in stage 5 of, of integral awareness or some kind of term like that. So I think the concept of balance and equilibrium is something we find in nature, and we need to bring that back into our, way of being and living and working in modern society.
Beautifully said. And yes to all of that. It's all about cycles. So yes, of course. So wonderful speaking to you today. I'm inspired. I've followed your work for very long, and it's really beautiful to see how it keeps emerging. It's a gift that keeps on bearing fruit. The true frugality, showing us that there is another way, a better way to be in the world, and to be stewards of the future as well. So thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you.